Hey guys, I'm Theobald Hedman and welcome to Southern Ingenuity. In this video, I'm going to be installing this automatic compressor draining valve on the bottom of my air compressor tank. That's to make sure that the condensate water that accumulates in the tank gets evacuated on a regular basis to prevent the tank from rusting to the point of failure. Now, if you haven't already seen my video on how a compromised tank can result in a potentially deadly explosion, then I highly recommend you watch it after this video. It gives some really good insight into some of the physics that are associated with the compressed air inside that tank. And there'll be a link to it at the end of this video as well as in the description. Now let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is drain the water, and it's a lot easier to do this while the tank is still pressurized. It's simply a matter of opening this small petcock valve on the bottom of the tank. And notice how much rust is in the water. I picked this kit up at Harbor Freight a couple of years ago, but I'm just now getting around to installing it. Now, this isn't an endorsement of this particular product. I just saw this while I was there and picked it up. You connect the valve to the drain port on the bottom of the tank, and then you connect an air line between the valve and the compressor's unloader line. The valve actuates when the unloader line pressurizes and depressurizes. Now, for those who may not know, the unloader line bleeds residual pressure off the compressor head when the motor shuts off. This is to make it easier for the motor to restart when the tank pressure drops below the cut-in pressure. Your configuration may be different, but mine has a 1/4-inch aluminum line between the head and the pressure switch. On the end that's connected to the switch, there's a small valve that functions like the valve stem on a car tire. When the switch engages, it closes the valve and allows pressure to build. When it disengages, the valve opens, allowing the pressure to bleed off. This kit was meant to be installed on compressors that have either a poly or a nylon type unloader line, but that's just because of the type of fittings that was supplied with the kit. I'm not sure exactly what the proper name for this type of fitting is, but it has a kind of a barbed nipple that works in conjunction with a nut to clamp the tubing in place. Now, if you know the proper name for this type of fitting, then please let me know in the comments. Now, I'm not going to use the plastic tubing that came with the kit. I'm going to use some 1/4-inch copper tubing instead. So I purchased some compression fittings separately at a local hardware store to replace the barb type fittings that came with the kit. For demonstration purposes, I've assembled the valve so it'll attach to the quick connect port on the top of the tank. The valve actuates twice during each compressor cycle. Once when the unloader line pressurizes at the start of the cycle, and then again at the end of the cycle when the line depressurizes. Here you can see the valve as it actuates. Notice the 2 bursts of air when I pressurize and then depressurize the valve. Before getting started, I'm going to turn off the breaker and the pressure switch to prevent the motor from starting when the pressure drops, and to avoid being electrocuted. After bleeding the pressure from the tank, I disconnect the unloader line. Then I spin the compressor around to get better access for installing the valve. After doing a little bit of evaluation to try to figure out which will be the best way to route the copper pipe, I think the best way to do that is going to be to come through the side of this mounting bracket underneath the belt, down the back of the tank, and then underneath to the valve. But to do that, I'm going to have to drill a hole in the mounting platform itself. Now, when I do that, I've got to be extremely careful not to damage the tank, and I mean not even a scratch. I don't want to do anything that's going to compromise the strength of this tank. After drilling the pilot hole, I use a unibit to open it up to about 5/8 of an inch. This is so I can install a piece of rubber fuel line over the copper pipe to prevent it from being damaged by vibrations while the compressor is running. Rather than tapping into the old unloader line, I'm just going to make a new one. I'll put the old one away somewhere and save it just in case this setup doesn't work or I decide to use a different type of valve in the future. I'm going to use the old line as a pattern for making the new one, taking special care to not crimp or kink the line while I'm bending the tubing. After getting the new line formed to an approximate fit, I'll go ahead and connect it to the compressor head and crimp the ferrule in place. Then I can get an approximate measurement for locating the T-fitting. With the T-fitting installed, I can then get the final measurement, cut, and connect the unloader line. Well, now it's time to install the valve on the bottom of the tank. But first, I've got to remove the old drain valve. And yeah, it took me a minute to realize I was turning it the wrong way. Now I've got to install the copper tube between the valve on the bottom of the tank and the T at the pressure switch. I go ahead and crimp the ferrule into place using an old fitting that I had on hand. This is going to make it easier when I connect the tubing to the drainer valve. Then it's just a matter of bending the tube along the contour of the tank back up to the pressure switch. To prevent the tubing from vibrating against the side of the tank, I'm going to secure it to some self-adhesive cable tie mounts. After getting everything back into position to run the compressor, I put some sawdust underneath the valve so you can see the bursts of air when the valve actuates. Well, I don't hear any air leaks. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, by all means, please click the like button and share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button because I've got some more cool DIY shop project videos on the way. So until next time, I'm Theobald Hedman. Thanks for watching Southern Ingenuity.